Well, we're back. It's Monday. It's Labor Day. We labored. Did you labor?
I labored. It was. Well, at least when I labored, it was air conditioned. The same with you.
Right.
But for some who had to labor today out there, it was not so nice.
Not nice at all. Joe Cioffi, Westward News, Long Island, Westward News, New Jersey.
And Joe Rayo, Westward News, Lower Hudson Valley. And Labor Day 2018 goes into the record books, Joe, as maybe not the hottest, but one of the hotter Labor Days in recent years around here.
And Tom Donovan is on first tonight. Oh, you guys are coming in so quick now, I can't see.
They're all waiting for us.
I know, I can't see. Oh, looks like Scott David and Daniel Kirby finished second and third. Joseph Pan was fourth, and that rounds out the superfecta, and Daniel Kirby rounds out the super high five.
And there you go.
But there are no payoffs tonight.
And more to come, I'm sure.
That's right. All right, so we've got a couple of things going on. Tropics seem to be front and center, so I think we'll take a look at what the story is with that, and we're going to look at Tropical Storm Gordon, and then we'll go over to Florence and take a look at all the problems that is causing forecasters. So I got the latest satellite loop here. Let me just refresh this. There you go. Get a full refresh might be nice.
What's really amazing, Joe, is that when you and I were here together on Friday, we were concentrating more on Florence, and the forecasters at the Hurricane Center were just looking at that mass of clouds to the east of Florida and saying, well, there's not much of a chance it's going to develop in anything. Come back here on Monday, and already we had a full-fledged tropical storm, which became Gordon, and they're still watching Florence out over the far eastern Atlantic.
Right,
and
which
that's going to be
still out in the far eastern Atlantic.
Something maybe for next week to look at, although we'll mention it now.
Yeah, and as far as Gordon is concerned, I mean, this started actually yesterday. Even as early as Saturday, you start to see the signature on the satellite was beginning to look a bit different, even though it was disorganized. We were starting to see some outflow in the cirrus on the northern and eastern side, and then yesterday, it was definitely clear that the upper air wind conditions were becoming far less hostile, and they started with the potential tropical cyclone statements. And this morning, while it was over the Keys, it became a tropical storm. And the satellite signature tonight, to me, is it's compact. You've got that band of rain that's way up to the north, and then there's a big gap, and then you have this concentrated area that's sitting off the Florida coast, and that's where the center of the tropical storm actually is. And I have the Tampa St. Pete radar. If we had looked at it a little earlier, you could actually see where the center is, but it's now far enough offshore that it's starting to go out of radar range. But as far as Florida is concerned, where much of South Florida was raining today, much of that rain now is over with, except for a small patch in and around the Tampa St. Pete area, and then maybe some renegade showers further south, and that's about it. So now the next stop is the Alabama-Mississippi Gulf Coast.
Right. Now it's going to take a path over the Gulf of Mexico, and for the day tomorrow, it's kind of in limbo, so to speak. It's not really going to influence anyone but the fish in the Gulf of Mexico. As you just mentioned, it's taking its leave of Florida, and by late tomorrow night or early on Wednesday morning, somewhere along the Alabama or Mississippi Gulf Coast, that storm system will be making landfall, and it could very well be making landfall as a Category 1 hurricane.
It has a shot. It's got 400 miles to go from where it is now to the Mississippi Gulf Coast. This is it's going to be in 86 degrees or higher water, especially as it nears the shoreline there, which is pretty shallow. You probably have some water temperatures up near the coast that are running at about 88 or 89, so this thing certainly has a chance to become a hurricane. I don't know if to me the upper air conditions are somewhat supportive for a steady intensification. I don't think they really support rapid intensification, where we're suddenly going to wake up with a major hurricane knocking on the door. At least I hope that's not the case. But strengthening is that part of the equation that the Hurricane Center forecasters will always tell you that they don't have the best handle on, and there's still a lot of variables that we don't understand, and weird things that occasionally happen that we haven't figured out yet. Track has gotten a lot better. The track area continues to shrink, but the intensity part of the equation still not quite there yet. And here's the from the latest advisory at 8 o'clock. It's at 26.7, 83.4. Top winds now 60 miles an hour, and moving west-northwest at 17. And here's a view, a different view from this is the Hurricane Center's interactive map, and I put the times where gales are most likely time of the arrival of gales, so you can see that those winds won't arrive until sometime tomorrow evening along the Mississippi, Alabama coastline. It's kind of tight there.
And it's, yeah, as you just mentioned, it's not going to be the kind of storm that's going to apparently ramp up rapidly. Although I do remember Katrina going to bed on a Saturday night, and I think it was a Category 1 or 2, and waking up the next morning, and all of a sudden it had become a 4 just before it was about to make land.
But that at least, you know, everything that was going on there really just spelled rapid intensification.
Right.
I don't think that was any surprise that it had intensified rapidly. It did get down to under 900 millibars, and it did reach Category 5 status, although it wasn't Category 5 when it hit land. But in this instance, I would be surprised to see it get much beyond a Cat 1.
Right.
I want to just bring up a couple of things, because I didn't want to stack up the whole kit and caboodle here. So I just wanted to bring up the spaghetti plots for Gordon. And Joe, you'll agree with me. Anytime you see all these, when you get to the point where they're all clustered very close together,
right,
like these are, you can feel fairly confident. I mean, it looks like almost all of the models take it over the Mississippi Gulf Coast here tomorrow night.
Right.
And then after that, it just keeps on going northwest.
And all of that frictional drag, when the system does make landfall, it's going to wring out all of that tropical moisture over a swath of Mississippi, northern sections of Louisiana, on into Arkansas. So these are places that, in all likelihood, are going to see an excessive amount of rain as we move into the middle and latter part of this week.
By the way, maps that you see here, courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com, and also we should emphasize the fact that just in case you're watching from the Gulf Coast, because we do have viewers from all over the place, or for that matter, those of you watching from here, and you know, if we have to deal with this, remember, you don't use these maps for making decisions. You should be using the Hurricane Center, nhc.noaa.gov, or your local weather service office or your local officials for the information you need. And by the way, these maps are courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com, a great website that we use every night. And I just want to give them credit, and give Levi Cowan credit for putting together this wonderful site, which we just absolutely love to use. Now, I want to go to let's take a look at Florence. For some reason, I keep wanting to call it Francis. I don't know why. But it's still so far out that I'm using the satellite loop, Joe, that goes all the way out to the African coast. Mm-hmm. And it's still visible on that particular sector. So this has not gotten any... I mean, it has been moving to the west, but it's been doing it all so slowly. And, you know, it's actually strengthened a little bit today. But we're going to be watching to see some shear. Kind of looks like it might have gotten a little elongated in the last couple of frames, but you know that could be just a temporary thing. But
and the movement is indeed rather slow. So any talk of possible influence, let's say, on the Atlantic seaboard, and believe me, I've already seen in many Facebook pages and websites already allusions to that. But any serious talk about that probably would not enter the picture until late next weekend or sometime early next week, because right now it's so far out to our east that, you know, anything can really happen from here on.
Oh no, it's a long way off. And by the way, there's a wave that's behind it, south of the Cabo Verde Islands. Looks like there might be a little bit of mid-level turning there. The Hurricane Center kind of upped their forecast down to 50% of this developing in the next 5 days. But I want to show everybody, you know, one of the modeled, what the dilemmas are with respect to weather going forward that makes this very problematic in terms of forecasting. And I'm going to just bring the upper air for the GFS. We're going to go out in the North Atlantic, and there are a couple of things going on. First of all, we have this big upper high in the eastern part of the United States.
Right.
Jet stream across southern Canada goes out across the Atlantic almost like a ruler from Labrador to England.
Right. A zonal flow of
Right.
ever saw a zonal flow.
A ridge sort of in the middle. This little circle that you see down here is the representation of Florence, and it moves right along. Now, a couple of things start to happen, and this is later this week, and right off the bat, there's a problem, because you've got the jet stream in Canada coming down just south of us. That's going to break the heat here on Friday. It starts to draw Florence north with more of a northerly component. The trough moves off the Canadian Maritimes, extends itself downward, misses it, and then a second short wave comes along early during next week, picks it up and kicks it out.
Right.
The problem with this is that there's a huge major disagreement with the models. Now here's the first thing. So here is the GFS, and I assume you looked at some of the European and everything else.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So here's the GFS upper air. Now let's put the European on. They kind of look the same, at least up in the Canadian part, but there's a much stronger signature on the European as far as the ridge is concerned, and it never really picks up Florence at all. The trough in the central Atlantic just completely bypasses it, and then here's where the big difference comes, which is back past day 7 and day 8. So here is the European at day 9, where it's got a ridge along the east coast enveloping around Florence, which is now sitting east of the Georgia coast, and a ridge that's built all the way up into eastern Canada. If we switch to the GFS has a trough there. It has hardly, the ridge in the east is hardly there, and it has a trough there. It's a completely different scenario.
The Canadian seems to be more in line with the in the Europeans.
There's the Canadian,
which brings a storm,
which has got another option,
right?
But it does have a stronger ridge,
right?
So you've got. See, there's one other part of this equation that's also problematic, and I'm going to go back to the GFS on this. First off, and let's bring up the surface, or as they say in Brooklyn, the surface.
Yeah.
All right, so here's your surface map on the GFS. Now, there's one issue right off the bat. If Florence stays at the strength it is now, okay, it's going to respond to the lower level steering, which will want to take it more toward the west. If the GFS wants to strengthen this to a hurricane, and then look at the pressures that it drops it to.
Right.
I mean, it's got basically a Category 4 hurricane here at next Monday.
9:32.
Right. And the thing is, if this is a stronger system, if this is a strong system of that magnitude, which I don't believe it will be, you're going to respond to the higher level steering, which is going to want to take it to the north. The European is responding to, is doing something different in that it keeps it weak, which I think makes more sense given what's going on. There's an upper low that's sitting northeast of the Leeward Islands that's going to create some shear.
Yeah.
The European has it almost down to a tropical depression here by Thursday before it strengthens it again, but it doesn't have a Category 4 hurricane in this position. It has a tropical storm with this surface high building to the north, and then it moves it westward toward Florida. So, and by the way, there's 1 storm, 2 storms, 3 storms, 3 storms, and at least 1 maybe depression coming off the near the Cabo Verde Islands toward the end of the period. It's very, very active.
What happened to all the homegrown storms that we were only supposed
Well,
to see?
you know what? And that's the thing now. All the talk with regards to the colder ocean, the below normal ocean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Sahara dust.
The dust. The only thing I will say is that probably because the ocean is a little cooler, it didn't stop tropical systems from developing. It just perhaps is slowing them. Yeah, it's delaying where and when they may become something larger. And that may come after they get west of 60 degrees west. But my point is that until we figure out these chess pieces, not so much the tropical systems in my view, but until we figure out the chess pieces in regards to all the other things that are going on, I don't think we're going to have a real handle on what's going to happen.
And don't forget that we're supposedly also in a pattern where we're supposed to be seeing an El Nino, which normally suppresses tropical activity. But if anything, it looks like
that ain't working right now.
If anything, in the last couple of weeks, it looks like tropical activity is becoming more robust.
Well,
but it is the peak of the season.
It is September. It wouldn't be the first time where we've had a quiet August that led to an explosive September. So, I mean, it seems to be where we're at. Although we are only talking about 2 tropical storms here. We don't have 2 major hurricanes on the map at the moment.
Right.
But nonetheless, it does look like it's going to be relatively busy going forward. Meanwhile, while all this is happening, we're in the land of bad hair through at least Thursday. And after that, we've got a break for the weekend, I think.
Well, it's a break in a similar version from the break that we had last weekend, where the temperatures dropped, although the sky conditions remained rather cloudy, and it looks like that could be the story for the upcoming weekend. There could even be some spotty rainfall, although depending upon which model you look at, a lot of that rain over the weekend may either stay, at least for the lower Hudson Valley, just off to the south, and we may even have some breaks of sun, or it might go the other direction. Yesterday the models were, especially the GFS, was like bringing lots and lots of rain over the entire area for Saturday and Sunday, and now it looks like it's trying to back away a little bit on that. But
it has to do with, I think it's because of this, with that next high.
That high
if the GFS is right with the strength of the shortwave trough moving through eastern Canada and it builds down a big high, then you might get some drying to come down at least for the first half of the weekend before the front comes back up maybe later on Sunday. But we don't know if that's part of the chess piece with Florence. Supposing that's weaker, supposing the ridge in the east is stronger, then you'll barely get the front through, and the relief there'll be some, but it won't be much.
Now this is the 18Z GFS,
right?
And it shows for Sunday afternoon about 2 o'clock a rather potent low pressure system, a tightening gradient. That low pressure system is the corpse or the remnants of what is now Gordon.
Well, part of it is anyway. Just go back. There's Gordon, which, by the way, the models don't seem to be handling very well. But there's Gordon coming inland, and it just kind of gets absorbed into that frontal boundary, and low pressure develops there and runs to the Great Lakes and then on up the St. Lawrence Valley. And there you see, Florence peaking next Tuesday, coming northeast of Bermuda. That's as far west as the GFS gets it.
Right.
Joe, it's been the GFS has been trying to do this with bringing cold fronts down and big highs and dew points in the 40s and 30s. It hasn't happened. I don't know why it's going to suddenly be right this time around.
Right. If you remember last week about this time, well, not last week, but about the middle of last week, there was some suggestion from the GFS that this weekend we would have in Albany, for example, a high on Saturday of 57 degrees, dew points in the 30s and 20s, and this glorious shot of autumn or fall weather. And now it looks like we may get a break in the heat wave, but it doesn't look like all that was being advertised last week. So you're right. Why would we want to believe what they're saying, or what the GFS, this particular model, is saying about a potential hurricane, 7 to 10 days out? It could be really anywhere.
John Ilya asks the storm off the west coast of Florida, because they have a huge red tide problem that's been occurring along coastal Florida. You can't, a lot of the beaches you can't get on them because of the gases that the tide gives off.
Right.
Makes it very uncomfortable. You can't breathe. Marine life has been, a lot of marine life has been killed.
Right.
If the storm is going to somehow alter that, that is a question that's probably a little bit above my pay grade anyway. I don't know I don't know the biology and the mechanics of red tide and how that all works. So I really can't answer that question.
Well, the very least, though, that storm will be, Gordon, will be acting as sort of an agitator in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right, it will upwell stuff, the water around.
So maybe that'll help in this red tide situation for them.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't, I mean, we're just speculating. I don't know the answer to that question. I'll have to find somebody that is knowledgeable on that, and I'll ask them. John Delfino, when is usually our last 90-degree day in New York City?
That's
a good question.
That's a good question. I think that maybe in the I used to keep a record, and I should go back and continue to do that. I've gotten lazy over the last year or so, but I have back at home like 20 plus years of records of White Plains, Westchester Airport. I think only about once, maybe in the last 20 or 22 years, they had a 90-degree day at White Plains. I think usually by the time we get to mid-September, we pretty well have placed all the 90-degree days behind us. I'll see what I can look up tonight and check that out. But
I can tell you, at least for Long Island, 90-degree days at this time of year are really rare. To see them at Montauk, I remember doing research once that after around August, like 10th or 11th, it was hard to find any 90-degree days at Montauk, and we had 2 or 3 of them this year. So that was really, really rare. Once you get to this point in early September, at least for Long Island anyway, unless you're in northern Nassau, northwestern Suffolk County, it's a really, really tough thing to do. And in another week or two, it's an almost impossible thing to do.
Absolutely.
I'll have to go back and look and see where the last 90-degree record high is. New York City might be a bit different. As for Newark, it might go a little bit longer.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure I've seen 90-degree days in October. But again, their records go all the way back to 1869. So there have been, even in the most anomalous years, there have been in October, more than a few, I think, 90-degree days.
Ryan Ford says, out of curiosity, can Florence come up the East Coast without a deep trough to the west? Ryan, I'll answer it. From my experience and from the storms that I've seen over the years, with all sorts of different combinations in terms of the upper air, all the ones that have moved up the East Coast that have impacted us have always had some kind of deep trough to the west. I've yet to see one that has come up the East Coast that has had impact, that has done it without a deep trough to the west. If it comes around the periphery of a high, it winds up either going just off, either far enough offshore, or if it comes close without a trough, putting some acceleration behind it, it moves over the colder water and it winds up weakening. We had, Hermine?
Right.
And a couple of others over the last 5 or 6 years that were like that, where, they came up and they sort of came up around the periphery of a ridge, but with no real push behind it, and they just basically fell apart, and they had minimal impact here.
Well, basically what both the European and to a lesser degree the Canadian models are saying is that this ridge offshore, this subtropical ridge, is going to expand like a balloon, and Florence would come around the bottom of the ridge, and there really isn't much of a trough to the west, but by coming around, it's being forced around underneath, and then just where else could it go? It can't go back to the east. So it is forced to go either north or northwest into either Florida or along the mid-Atlantic coast. So.
And the Europeans' idea, by the way, is not far-fetched because, if only because of the fact that there have been a few storms over the last 15 years that have done weird things where they've actually moved out, turned around, and have come back. Francis and Jean, someone reminded me of that back in the early 2000s. And I think those were both in the same year. It might have been 2004. I'll have to go back and look. But the point is that if we're to see something that looks like it's going to recurve and then suddenly buckle back to the west or southwest and head toward Florida, wouldn't be a shocker.
Right.
This is all, we're just talking off the top of our heads, folks. We're not predicting this. This is not a forecast. It's way too early to talk anything like that. But since everybody's asking, we're just kind of giving you the idea of what's in play in the atmosphere, which I think is the way you should look at it.
Right.
Just there's a storm out there. You know that there are all these puzzle pieces that are going to have to be they're going to be moved around, and how they're moved around is going to change several times or more over the next 2 or 3 days. So you just have to kind of go with the flow, and we'll have to just figure out if the jet stream in Canada is weaker and the ridge in the east is stronger. Then yes, there probably is going to be some. You're going to probably see Florence in some form head toward the east coast. If it's the opposite, then probably not.
You're going to wait for them all to get on the same page, and
they're not there yet.
With so many of them scattered over this way and that way and this, it's almost totally meaningless.
Yeah.
Beyond a few days to try to forecast where Florence ultimately is going to go.
Total agreement with you there, Mr. Rayo.
Thank you.
All right, let me just see if there's a couple more comments here. Daniel Kirby says, looks like a stalled front in your area. Daniel Kirby's already got the September rainfall number taken out. He did that on September 1st in the Blue Ridge Mountains in West Virginia. And you're going to have more, you got more rain coming. And I think that pretty well covers it. Will the Joe and Joe show be on Patreon? I am going to upload it to my Patreon page, Scott. Yes, it will be there, so you can look for it there as well. And by the way, just to let you know, I did cut a 51-minute YouTube video about 2 hours ago. It's on my YouTube channel, and it really goes into detail about what's going on with both Florence and with Gordon. So if you're a weather junkie, go take a look at my latest YouTube video.
My new nickname for you, the Professor.
No.
Professor Cioffi.
No.
Well, we've always known that once you're into something, you just for
I don't let it go.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't let it go.
Absolutely.
Well, we are going to call it a night. So everybody have a great evening. Hopefully your Labor Day holiday weekend was great. Joe is going to be on at the top of the hour at Fios 1 News Lower Hudson Valley.
And Joe will be on Fios 1 News New Jersey, Fios 1 News Long Island. And come the crack of dawn tomorrow morning, we will have Brian Fitzgerald, Chief Meteorologist, and Jeffrey Banson,
who just had a birthday and turned 30.
Wow, big 3-0.
He's reached the second plateau.
I was 30 once.
Yes.
Many moons ago.
Yes, we all were.
Yeah, we were.
And Brittany Borer, Addison Green on midday. Joe and I will be back tomorrow night. Have a great evening. We will see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow.